In this video, we will describe how to tie a surgeon's knot in both one- and two-handed fashion when the strand held by the active hand starts in a position that is below the passive strand, or in other words, closer to us than the passive strand. Surgeon's knots are types of flat knots. They are generally less secure than flat square knots. The primary benefit of a surgeon's knot is that the two turns of the first throw make it more difficult to undo the flat configuration of the first throw during tightening of the second throw. This hypothetically reduces the rate of non-apposing or error knots. Single post half-hitch knots can also be used to achieve desired loop tautness and are much more robust for this purpose, so surgeon's knots are never technically necessary. Nonetheless, for completeness, we will describe the technique used for tying surgeon's knots here. The prerequisites for this video are the one-handed and two-handed square knot videos with the active hand on top. The video on the orientation of tightening of flat square knots can also be applied to surgeon's knots. Here we will demonstrate the tying of surgeon's knots using our right hand as the active tying hand using a two-handed tying technique. Tying begins in the same manner as it did for the two-handed square knot. We adjust the strand length, grasp the suture in our active hand, create a semicircle with our thumb and index finger, cross the strands over the thumb, rotate our active hand through the loop, pass the passive strand to the active hand, rotate the active hand back through the loop, and hand the passive strand back to the passive hand. The active hand then releases the black passive strand. It is here that the tying of a surgeon's knot diverges from that of a square knot. Rather than tightening the throw that has now been created, the index finger and thumb of the active hand are pinched back together and the active hand is rotated back through the loop by flexing and supinating the wrist. The index finger and thumb of the active hand are then spread apart to receive the black strand. The passive hand then positions the black strand to rest on the pad of the index finger. The active hand then pinches the black passive strand. The black strand is passed through the loop a second time by the index finger and thumb of the active hand by extending and pronating the wrist. The passive hand takes the black strand from the active hand, and then the throw is tightened using the same vertical and horizontal principles described in the square knot videos. The second throw of a surgeon's knot is the same as the second throw of a square knot, as demonstrated here. Of note, the surgeon's knot as shown here is less secure than the flat square knot, but it can be made more secure by performing two turns on the second throw as was done for the first throw. Here we will demonstrate the tying of surgeon's knots using our right hand as the active tying hand using a one-handed tying technique. We start similarly to the one-handed square knot with a karate chop maneuver using our active hand, then drape the black strand across the active hand with our passive hand. However, next, rather than flexing our middle finger, we will instead wrap the black strand around the middle, ring, and pinky fingers of the active hand a second time. Once the black strand has been wrapped a second time around the active hand, the middle finger is flexed, bringing both turns of the black strand with it, and then the white strand is hooked on the dorsal aspect of the distal middle finger. The middle finger is then extended and the white strand is pinned between the middle and ring fingers of the active hand by adduction of them. The white strand is then rotated through the loop and the strands are grasped by each hand. Tightening is then performed using the same vertical and horizontal principles described in the square knot videos. Once again, the second throw of a surgeon's knot is the same as the second throw of a square knot, as demonstrated here. But again, the surgeon's knot as shown here is less secure than a flat square knot, and can be made more secure by performing 2 turns on the second throw as was done for the first throw.